Welcome everybody. Let me introduce you to our new bell, which has been kindly provided. And the idea of this is that when someone has come to the end of their time, either Ellen or I will politely ring the bell and you will know that you are at the end of your time. And we will not be like a guillotine saying you must be silenced immediately, but we would be very grateful if you could wind up fairly soon after the bell rings. Now then, today's meeting, I've got some notes here as to what I'm supposed to say. Welcome to this meeting of the Western Area Planning Committee. I am Christopher Newbury. I'm the chairman of the committee. I welcome you all to this meeting. The first item is apologies, and I have Ellen on my left, who is going to tell us about the apologies and substitution.
Thank you very much, Chair. So we've got apologies from Councillor Jonathan Seed and also from Councillor Pip Ridout, but she is joining us online, so she is able to see and hear the meeting as well.
I think that doesn't technically count as attending the meeting. She's not able to vote, is she? No. Okay, so we know that welcome to Councillor Ridout online.
Thank you, Chair. I am aware I can't vote, but it's too late to get a substitute.
Goodness me, this is a very first. I mean, we've never had a virtual voice coming from, it's like, well, I better not say, but it's like a voice ex machina, right.
Unique like me, Chairman.
Right you are. Thank you very much, Councillor Ridout. Ellen, can anybody advise me, is Councillor Ridout able to speak while she's on this virtual connection?
Yep, she can speak. It's just only that she can't vote.
She can't vote?
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Ridout, so we can bring you in if you have any advice, but we can't let you vote. Okay. Minutes of the previous meeting are on pages 5 to 22 of today's agenda papers. Do we have any comments or corrections to those minutes as they have been printed? I don't see anyone waving, so I will move that we approve them. Someone to second. Thank you very much, Councillor Viger. All in favour, please wave. Any against? No, I think that's unanimous. Brilliant. Declarations of interest. This is only for members of Wiltshire Council. No one else needs to declare any interest in anything on today's agenda. Do any members of the council have any interest that they would like us to note? I'm looking around and I'm not seeing anyone. I don't think you would need to declare anything, Councillor Ridout, because you're not present. You're just up there somewhere. Right. The next item then is Chairman's announcements. First of all, welcome to Councillor Jo Trigg, who is the local member for the Trowbridge application, and we will be hearing from her in due course. I believe this is her first meeting, so welcome to her. The only other Chairman's announcements are the usual ones. First of all, could I ask everyone to turn their mobile phones, laptops, etc. to silent, which includes me, and the usual word of warning about fire alarms. If the fire alarm goes off, we're not aware of a fire drill, so I will hand over straight away to Ellen, who's on my left, who will get us out of the building quickly. Public participation, item 5. This is the one where I try to explain, for the benefit of people who don't come or haven't come here before, how we deal with items on the agenda. First, an officer will present a report and explain the recommendation. The next thing is that I ask members of the committee if they have any questions to the officer, and I will always bring in the other members of Wiltshire Council, such as Councillor Trigg, if they would like to ask a question. We then go to the public participation, and we have a number of people signed in to speak today. We have, for the first application, we have Mr. Hemming, Ms. Lisa Wicks, Ms. Kate Leroyd, Mr. Driscoll, Mr. Peake, and Councillor Siddall. And our normal order is that we are obliged to take the objectors first, the supporters next, and the representative of the town or parish council last. Councillor Siddall is representing Holt Parish Council. The members of the public have up to 3 minutes to speak. Statutory consultees, such as parish councils, have up to 4 minutes to speak. The local unitary member can then come in if not a member of the committee, and that in this case it means Councillor Trigg today. We then go into debate, and once we've gone into debate, for reasons that are quite complicated, we can't have any interplay between the committee and members of the public, and we ask people not to pass notes or interrupt or to just let us get on with it. At the end of the debate, we take a vote, and we do that by show of hands, unless a recorded vote is asked for, and then we announce the result. So that, I hope, explains the way we do it. The planning appeals and updates is the first substantial item. This comes before the two planning applications, and I believe Jen Collins is standing in for Kenny Green today, and I will hand over to Jen to speak to this if she has anything to add to the written report.
So it's an interesting one insofar as this is for the, well, it's interesting insofar as that it has, I'll get there, sorry. So it's for the siting of 22 storage containers. It was called to committee by Councillor Newbury in the event of a recommendation of approval, but was refused on delegated powers on the basis of the impact on the national landscape and the amenity of residential occupiers. It was allowed at appeal, and it was they considered that the size, siting and appearance of these 22 shipping containers actually protected and conserved the national landscape, and the appeal was upheld. They found no concern in relation to the amenity of neighbouring occupiers in terms of noise, pollution and outlook, and the inspector said that the storage containers were not dissimilar in their appearance to close-boarded fencing. This clearly riled the National Landscape Partnership, who actually challenged the decision, well, made a complaint to the Planning Inspectorate on the basis that they failed to take into account the statutory duty under the Crow Act to further the reasons for the designation of the national landscape. And the Planning Inspectorate have robustly, in some ways, defended their position, said, no, this isn't the case. I understand that the matter is still being discussed because the National Landscape Partnership weren't overly content with that, but it sits at the moment as being allowed with the conditions. And something that was quite interesting as well is that there was a previous permission on the site that was still extant. And she said that, she acknowledged that in allowing the appeal, it would result in overlapping permissions for the site, but that this conflict would only arise where one of the development prevents the implementation of the other, and what the appellant chooses to implement was not a matter for her to consider. And the fact that they were in breach of a condition on the previous planning application was, again, not a matter for consideration as a material consideration in that appeal, which is quite an interesting viewpoint. But we are where we are, and the appeal has been allowed and remains unchallenged at the moment.
Thank you. That was certainly a very interesting
Sorry,
application.
it's at Greenhill Farm. I should have said that.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's very interesting. Does anyone have any questions or comments on the planning appeals and updates? In that case, we need to note the report. I'll move that we note it. Someone to second, Councillor Carbin. All in favour of noting it? That's unanimous. That then takes us on to the first. We've got two planning applications on our agenda today. The first one is land off Melksham Road, Great Park, Holt. And I ask Julie Mitchell to come and take the hot seat and take us through her report and recommendation on this application. Over to Julie Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. Is that volume okay? I've got one update, which is just a minor adjustment necessary to condition 17 to insert the word boundary of before the nearest noise-sensitive dwelling. This is for clarity and it's been discussed with the developer. This should read then that the rating sound level from the pumping station should be limited to 35 decibels at the boundary of the nearest noise-sensitive dwellings when calculated in accordance with the BS requirement. Okay. So this application seeks approval for reserve matters for the erection of 90 dwellings on land adjacent to Great Parks in the village of Holt. The application site comprises a single agricultural field of approximately 3.7 hectares and adjoins the existing built limits and settlement boundary at the eastern edge of the village. The site is bounded by the road and properties within Great Parks to the west, Melksham Road, the B3107 to the north, and by fields to the east and the south. The site is currently accessed via a field access gate from Melksham Road. There is no formal access into the site. A public footpath, Holt 56, between Melksham Road and Bradley Lane crosses the southeasternmost part of the site. The site lies outside of the conservation area for Holt, which lies beyond the existing housing development at Great Parks and Little Parks. Oxon Lees Farmhouse is a Grade 2 listed building which lies approximately 250 metres to the northeast of the site. The site is not within any national or local landscape designation. The existing land use of the site is agricultural, although the planning statement sets out that it was formerly used for equestrian purposes as part of the West Wilts Equestrian Centre, along with the fields adjoining the site to the east. The mapping and aerial extract on the slide shows the boundary of the site in relation to the village of Holt. We'll now talk you through a small number of photographs of the site. The first one being the boundary of the site with Melksham Road, looking out of the village towards Melksham. These two are both also from Melksham Road, looking towards the top one, looking towards Holt, where the current entrance to the village and the speed limit sign and crossing exists. And then further out, also looking towards the village, where there's the gate post with the village name. The site there then is on the left-hand side as you would drive into the village from that direction. The next two slides are views from Great Parks, which is the first housing development as you come into Holt on the left-hand side. These are just taken in the summer of 2024 when the site had been acquired and was enclosed by the Harris fencing. These two photographs I've included are from the LVIA submitted with the outline application, just because they show a wider angle than it's possible to get of photographs from within the site.
Sorry, forgive me interrupting you. Not everyone will know what an LVIA is. Could you just tell us about that?
Yes, it's the landscape and visual impact assessment that was submitted with the original application. So these are taken from within the site. The lower is standing at the vantage point of the public footpath which crosses the site, looking towards the development in Great Parks, which you can see, hopefully if it's not too small on the screen, in the background of the field. So turning to the application, the site benefits from outline planning permission for up to 90 dwellings, which was granted by the Planning Inspectorate Appeal in July 2023. The outline permission includes the means of access to the site from Great Parks, with all other matters reserved for future considerations, and that is the application that we are considering today. It is only those reserved matters, namely appearance, landscape and scale, that are for consideration in the application before you today. So the site layout is shown in the slide that's currently on display. The proposal shows that it's for the construction of 90 dwellings, which is the full amount of the up to 90 dwellings, which was approved at the outline stage, of which 40% would be affordable housing. The proposed layout under consideration is shown as in the slide. The development comprises 54 market houses, which comprises a mix of 2, 3, 4 and 5 bedroom houses, and 36 affordable houses. These comprise 5 shared ownership houses, which are a mix of 2 and 3 bedrooms, 22 properties for affordable rent, which are a mix of 1 bedroom apartments and 2, 3 and 4 bedroom houses, and 9 first homes, which are a mix of 1 bedroom apartments and 2 and 3 bedroom housing. The affordable housing 10-year plan on the screen now shows the position of the affordable housing units. These are in various locations throughout the site, but many of which grouped in terraces, which is usually necessary where the tenure is restricted. So the yellow that you can see, these are the first homes. The blue are the affordable housing rent properties, and the purple are to be the shared ownership. As well as the 40% affordable housing, the scheme also includes the provision of public open space, which is noted to be greater than the area sought by the legal agreement agreed at outline stage, landscape planting, pedestrian, cycle and vehicular links, which includes upgrade to the public right-of-way, which is shown in the landscape plan. If I can move the cursor, just cutting across the bottom of the site there, so that line of that path is to be maintained. A sustainable urban drainage system and the associated infrastructure and hard landscaping necessary for the development. During the course of the application, amended plans were submitted which sought to address issues raised by consultees and third parties, which included removal of housing units to the southeast of the public right-of-way, relocation of the attenuation pond to the southwest corner of the site, revisions to the central green space, changes to the design of the apartment blocks, including reduction in the roof height, changes to external materials to primarily reconstituted stone and predominantly red-brown roof tiles, materials to boundary treatment changed from timber to stone to match dwellings in the locality, in the development, changes to the internal access roads and parking spaces to satisfy the highways officer. This slide is of illustrative street scenes. The top one is the street scene that would face Melksham Road at the top of the site. The middle street scene is the cross-section through the site, west to east, showing the apartment blocks in the context of the housing. So this is the apartment block in the middle there. The bottom street scene is that facing eastwards towards the surrounding open landscape. The following slides are the various house types which are scattered through the development in various locations. We've got the Epsom and Chilworth house type, Godstone, Highclere and Longstock house types, which are detached and semi-detached, the Marlborough and the Oakley house types, Ripley and Shalford house types, Lambourne and Penwood house types. Penwood's there been shown as semi-detached. Radley house types, which are semi-detached and terraced. Eversley and Walton and Radley house types, again, predominantly terraced. These are the elevations and floor plans to the flats that are proposed. There are 2 blocks of flats, each comprising 6 apartments. So this is one of them, plots number 54 to 59, and this is the other one, which is broadly similar but has some slight differences, including the shape of the porch. So throughout the estate, the materials are to be reconstituted buff-coloured stone with red, brown, grey tiles and some grey tiles in a smaller number of the properties. The exact details of material are to be agreed through conditions to enable suitable character and quality of the stone and tiles. The scope of the application for consideration, as said, is a reserve matters application in which both the principle of development and means of access were established through the grant of outline planning permission. The report sets out that the consideration of the reserve matters is limited to matters of appearance, landscaping, landscape and scale only. It is recognised that the development is a significant development on an unallocated site on the edge of a village settlement, and consequently there would be some localised landscape harm arising from a development of 90 dwellings, which would inevitably have an urbanising effect on the landscape at a rural village edge. A constraint on tree planting along Melksham Road due to a water easement and the layout of development, which includes areas of hard standing for cars to the frontage of dwellings, would lead to localised harm through the resultant urbanisation of an open landscape area when viewed from Melksham Road. Such harm is minor and attracts moderate weight in the assessment of the application. Little weight is attached to any wider landscape harm, given the principle of the development has already been accepted and such visual impact would arise with any housing scheme on this site. The proposal has been negotiated at length and revised to address and remove objections and achieve a good quality scheme which has satisfactorily addressed the objections from the Council's urban design and landscape officers. This proposed scheme will deliver 90 dwellings, of which 36 will be affordable homes, meeting the required 40% delivery in this location. The type and tenure of the affordable housing has been confirmed as acceptable by the Housing Enabling Officer. The scheme would provide on-site open space that can be used as local recreational facilities for future and existing residents in the locality, including play provision of a local area of play and play-on-the-way equipment. This is afforded moderate weight in the planning balance, as part of it is embedded mitigation, but it would serve residents over and above directly addressing the impact of the scheme and the minimum open space requirements secured at outline. Additionally, as contributions towards off-site sports provision in the vicinity, including the Holt Recreation Field, would be provided through the Section 106 agreement. There are no identified highway safety implications associated with the proposed scheme, and the means of access is outside the scope of the consideration, having been determined at outline. The proposal has the support of the Highways Officer subject to conditions. The Council's ecologist is satisfied that the scope of ecological enhancements would result in a slight betterment of biodiversity on site and attracts moderate weight in favour of allowing the scheme as it goes beyond the policy requirement. The sustainability credentials of the scheme do not exceed the minimum expectations. However, conditions are suggested which will allow for some uplift in sustainable technologies. In terms of weight, this is considered a neutral factor. No demonstrable harm has been identified in terms of residential amenity, but there is no identified benefit either, and as such, this is afforded neutral weight also. There is no other harm identified arising from the proposal, and there are no outstanding technical objections to the proposed scheme from any internal or statutory consultees. The concerns of Holt Parish Council and local residents have not been fully addressed in the revised plans, and where objections remain, these have been considered carefully throughout the officer report. There are, however, no technical grounds for refusal subject to the recommended conditions in compliance with conditions on the outline permission. Significant weight is attributed to the delivery of market housing given the shortfall in housing land supply, which has increased since the outline permission was granted. Additional significant weight is attributed to the delivery of affordable housing, which would meet an identified need, weighing in favour. The scheme would provide on-site open space that can be used as recreational facilities and was also afforded weight. The slide on display now shows the various contributions that would be achieved by the granting of the reserve matters which were secured at the outline permission. In addition, the scheme would be liable for SIL funding, of which 25% would go directly to the Parish Council for local community projects. Granting the approval for these reserve matters would realise these contributions and is given significant weight in the assessment. There are also indirect economic benefits. As the National Planning Policy Framework sets out presumption in favour of sustainable development, unless any adverse impacts of so doing would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. in accordance with the NPPF and the significant shortfall in the housing land supply, the proposal is recommended for refusal when considered against the framework taken as a whole.
For approval, perhaps?
I'm so sorry, yes, approval when taken as a whole. The proposal, or to just reiterate before I finish, that the proposal for consideration today must be determined with regard to the detail of reserved matters only and not the principle of development of the site or the means of access, which was considered at outline. In this context, the officers believe that the scheme that has been secured is a high quality scheme which addresses as many of the local concerns as possible. And again, yes, sorry, I skipped to the wrong part there. The officer recommendation to the committee is to grant approval for the reserve matters, subject to the conditions as set out in the officer report, with a minor amendment to condition 17 set out at the outset. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Well, this is called in by Councillor Trevor Carbin, who's with us today, to consider the matters set out on page 33. The next item then is to see if there are any questions from members of the council to the officer. I'm looking around the room. Councillor Carbin, local member.
Just one really. I'm looking at page 36, where it's got the previous planning applications, etc. And it's discharge of condition 6 acoustics, which it says is under consideration. I had a look at that one on the website and it said it was decided, but only partially accepted. Can you give me an update on what's happening with that condition?
It's been partially discharged at the time of writing the report. I think that was still to be determined, but it's been approved. It's only partially discharged because the part of the condition relies on the implementation, so it can't be fully discharged until those measures have actually been implemented within the scheme.
Councillor Stuart Palmer.
I'm a broken record on this one. The green spaces, who's going to be looking after them when the development's finished?
There's a management company. This is a village, so Trowbridge Town Council will probably not be rushing forward.
I'm not volunteering that, but I think it should be offered to the parish council. That's a first refusal.
Well, let's hear what the case officer thinks. Could we? I mean, management company can sometimes be interpreted as the town or parish council becomes the management company. So would it be within the terms of what we're recommended to grant that if the parish council wanted to maintain it, it could be the management company?
It might be possible to separate the management of the open spaces from the management of the estate overall, but the management company is going to be responsible for the management of the estate as a whole rather than it being adopted, so that they would have responsibility for the maintenance of the roads and all the other infrastructure within the site. However, the areas around the site, which are kind of not integral to the development, they're on the periphery of the site, it would be possible if the parish council wanted to discuss with the management company or the developer about maintaining those in future. That would need to be a discussion that would need to take place. We'd have to see what the legal agreement obviously says on those matters.
Is that an answer that you can accept, Councillor Palmer?
I think so. I think this is quite a complex one in that there's flats and so on. It's not as simple as just some of the green space being managed. And I also believe Holt Parish Council would have no interest at all.
I think you might be right. Councillor Ernie Clark.
Thanks, Chairman. Might not be planning matters, I'm sure I'll be told if they're not. So would this management company be offered to the residents, or is it going to go out to a sort of third party who I think residents on bits of Paxcroft Mead know exactly what they've got coming if that happens? And the other thing is the contribution towards the sports facilities. That's not even £3,000 a house. What does Wiltshire Council or the officer that's negotiated this think anybody's going to get for £21,000 these days?
Julie Mitchell.
Well, these are both matters which were determined at the outline permission, and they're not part of the reserve matters, so we can't actually alter the contributions that are secured. So in terms of how the management company operates in future, that's a matter to satisfy the legal agreement, and the contributions are as set out and can't actually be altered through a reserve matters application.
Tony Clark.
Chairman, if I may. I appreciate that. So you say the management committee's already been agreed. So what was agreed? Is it going out to a third party?
To my knowledge, it's not been agreed, because that's a matter that needs to be sorted out to satisfy the legal agreement. That's separate to the consideration of the reserve matters and doesn't become relevant until such time as the development can start, and they haven't got reserve matters yet, so they cannot actually proceed with that.
So,
oh,
it's okay, Chair. So really, you don't know whether it's going to be offered to the residents or just bunged out to a company?
Not at this point, no.
No. Okay, and one other thing, Chairman, if I may. On the very first slide on your presentation, there was a sign or something. Just wondered what that was for. Was it the developer for this site, just presuming that that one, is that actually advertising this site that hasn't got permission yet?
Well, it has the outline permission, and yes, it is to advertise the upcoming development on the assumption that the reserve matters is submitted with the council.
Do we have a copy of this Section 106 agreement? Has it been completed?
Yes, it's been completed. It was completed at the time of the appeal.
So could we, perhaps before we get to the debate, could we check what the Section 106 agreement says about a management company? Does anybody have that? I see Charlotte Burkis is nodding. You could have a look at that. Brilliant. We might be able to come back to you on that, Councillor Ernie Clark. Are there any other questions from members of the council? I'm not seeing any hands. So that takes us on to the public forum. And we have, as I said before, we have Mr. Hemming, Ms. Wicks, Ms. Leroyd, who are objectors. We have Mr. Driscoll, who is the applicant, Mr. Peake, who is the agent, and then we have Councillor Siddall from Holt Parish Council. So, Mr. Hemming, are you there? You have up to 3 minutes, sir.
Yes, good afternoon. Hi, Matthew Hemming. I'm an owner at number 7 Great Parks. Here today to present an objection, not to the overall development, but as they say, the devil's in the detail. So yeah, we live immediately adjacent to the site and have made a number of representations during the consultations on the layout. And our main concern relates to the location of the foul water pumping station, which currently sits 5 meters from our boundary. As has been noted in the record of decision, there has been some effort to manage noise, but the main issue that is going to result from that pumping station is odor, and there is there's been no assessment of odor, so there is then a decision taken without any evidence as to the effect of that odor, and I can take anyone to a number of pumping stations that do result in odor, and we're going to have to, we and the other residents of Great Parks are going to have to live with that for the rest of our lives. And so making a planning decision without evidence as to those impacts is incorrect, I believe. And ultimately, there technically are some very simple solutions of just moving that pump station further away. In earlier iterations of the development design, both on the plans and in the engineering reports, the pump station is further away. And if we went back to the planning layout image on the slides there, you could very easily see, just wait for it, there. So it's that little piece right at the bottom that currently turns to the left. You could just as effectively turn it to the right and gain an extra 10 meters or more of space. Additionally, given that it is such an important element of the development with the potential to impact on external parties, I urge the council to put in a condition that regulates its performance. At the moment, the planning officer states that it can be operated without odour, but that provides us no assurance that it will be. Furthermore, the future operation of this station is then handed to Wessex Water, who've not been involved in its design, or agreed to make the commitment that it would be operated without odour. So I think that's also flawed, and that again there's a lack of technical evidence that the surge pump station could or indeed will be operated without odour. And if it does have odour, it will affect our, we live in our garden in summer, all of those houses face that space, and we will be, our quality of lives, our enjoyment, property values are all going to be impacted by this. And so I urge a simple redesign and a planning condition. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hemming. Bang on time. Ms. Wicks, are you there?
I'm going to start first. I'm Kate Leroyd. Good afternoon, councillors. I'm urging you to turn down this reserve matter scheme. I'm sure many of you feel constrained by Wiltshire's housing land supply issue, but I urge you to consider and take heart from the planning inspector's decision on the 9th of October 2023 regarding land at Fylands in Malmesbury. That Malmesbury appeal case involved a reserve matter scheme which was worse than the original outline plan. It was cramped, poorly designed, with downgraded green spaces. The planning officer's committee report recommended it was acceptable, but Wiltshire Council's Area Planning Board rejected the scheme. They cited Core Policy 57. The developer appealed, the developer lost. The inspector there upheld the council stance. The poor design was unacceptable, even with a housing shortfall. This Malmesbury situation mirrors Holt. The developers here have submitted a lower quality scheme, substantially lower quality than was assessed originally. Core Policy 57 still applies. Poor design cannot be justified by the tilted balance. If you refuse the scheme today, the developers can submit a better scheme within a year, ensuring these homes are built to a higher standard. But if you approve it now, this subpar estate will define Holt for the next century. The proposed design completely ignores the Wiltshire Design Guide and simply places generic estate homes at Holt's edge. The original plan, seen at the appeal, had architecture that reflected the village's built heritage, a new village green, tree-lined streets and an improved gateway. All of that has been stripped away bit by bit. What remains is a poorly laid out development that will harm the village. The parish council and residents have tried really hard to engage constructively with the development process, but this hasn't got us very far. The Malmesbury decision proves you can reject a bad reserve matter scheme, and I urge you to do the same here. We will briefly describe a few of the major concerns. First, this development will be a really poor visual gateway to Holt. As you saw in the pictures, Melksham Road is the entrance to our village, and at the appeal we were promised a soft feathered edge to the village, and a key element was a strengthened landscape buffer along Melksham Road. What we're going to get instead is a harder urban edge to the frontage, double the number of houses without the softening front gardens that were originally proposed. 36 driveways for parking dominate the frontage, removing the green space that would soften it. A weaker landscape buffer, significantly weaker, and the result is that rows of cars and bin stores are going to be Holt's entrance. It's explicitly contrary to Wiltshire Design Guide. Malmesbury refusal was based on these issues. You have the power to reject it too.
Thank you very much. Is Ms. Wicks there? Okay, so you're next.
So following on from Kate, our next point is how the original outline plan included a central green space, now scrapped, Wiltshire's landscape officer criticised the reduction of this area, and I quote his words here: "It is more akin to a widened grass verge to deal with visibility splay issues rather than a conscious effort to create a developmental core." For those of you who know Holt, you will have seen Ham Green. What is on these plans is not a village green. This is another example of design dilution, just as seen in Malmesbury. Secondly, the site now has 3-storey high blocks of flats exceeding the height of 2.5-storey houses agreed at appeal. The developer will say the flats are 2.5 storeys high, but from side elevation drawings that were shown on slides earlier, they are clearly 3 storeys. The third floor shows 2 entire flats, against the urban design officer's comment to only put 1. Our Holt character statement clearly shows attic rooms in roofs in Holt houses, not 3-storey high. Let's be honest, these are 3-storey buildings. Thirdly, the developer proposes uniformly constituted stone for all 90 dwellings from their Garden Village estate collection, lacking any attempt to blend in with local architectural detail and ignoring Holt's Bath natural stone heritage. Now, taking all of the above into account, there is one overarching reason why there are so many unresolved design issues. Bewley Homes have deliberately increased the built space on the site, and while the committee report plays this down as only being 10%, this is not meeting local need. It is maximising profit. Yes, there are still 90 homes, but now a staggering 57% as 4 and 5 beds for private plots, compared to 40% agreed at appeal, where there are no 5-bed houses on the site. Affordable housing at outline stage, agreed at appeal, covered 40% of the site. This has been slashed to less than a third, a major deviation. The impact can be seen on the layout, appearance, scale and landscaping of the site, particularly with the car parking dominating frontages. Tree-lined streets have had to be taken out, there is no room, and the pumping station orientation is unacceptable for existing residents. No bungalows, despite Wiltshire Core Policy 46 prioritising homes for an ageing population. This is a deliberate shift to maximise profit with executive homes, increasing harm to the landscaping and undermining Wiltshire's own housing policies. I quote directly from the Wiltshire Design Guide: "The proportion of open market dwellings of different sizes must reflect assessed local need as opposed to commercial preferences alone." In conclusion, councillors, I urge you today not to prioritise the rush to build houses over your own policies. The Malmesbury appeal shows you don't have to. The choice is clear. Councillors, refuse this scheme and ask the developers to return with something better that truly reflects our landscape, our community and our built heritage. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And then the next speaker is Mr. Driscoll, who is the applicant.
Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to address you today. I'm Andrew Driscoll, a director of Bewley Homes who dealt with the site purchase from the previous landowner and currently overseeing the application before you. Bewley is an SME house builder. We've been building quality homes for over 30 years, and we've recently expanded our business into the West Country, and Holt is now our 3rd site in Wiltshire, with 2 others well under construction. This is a Reserve Matters application for the consented site south of Melksham Road, Holt, that will deliver 90 new homes, public open space, play areas, along with SIL and Section 106 contributions for local facilities. Our proposals incorporate high-quality design throughout that positively responds to the existing character of Holt. We're proud to present a scheme which we believe excels in a whole range of areas, including betterment in biodiversity, building regulations and climate change, public open space, including a community orchard, and improved affordable housing space standards. Shortly after acquiring the site, we were out meeting with our immediate neighbours to understand their concerns and comments about our proposals, and we did the same with Holt Parish Council and statutory consultees. The process has been ongoing and the final scheme has been shaped as a result of this extensive engagement undertaken. We're pleased to have received no objections or comments from 16 of your officers and statutory consultees, and your planning officer has stated that the density of the scheme is considered appropriate, the proposed landscaping and layout is appropriate, the apartments are a good standard of design and that the development as a whole is considered to present a high quality, efficient and appropriate sustainable design that draws on local context and would integrate well into the locality. Holt Parish Council have objected to the scheme despite efforts and 3 meetings to try and overcome their concerns. But on a positive note, through dialogue, their concerns have reduced from 14 pages and 11 principal concerns down to just 2 pages and 4 principal concerns. So we can say there has been some progress. We sincerely hope you'll approve the application in front of you today, and if approved, we can be on site in the coming months and by the end of the year deliver new homes and infrastructure on this sustainable, already consented site. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Driscoll. Next is Mr. Peake, who is the applicant's agent.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm Simon Peake, Associate Director at RPS. And as you say, I've been the planning agent on behalf of Bewley. I think the first point to emphasise again is that outline planning permission exists. The principle of residential development is established for 90 dwellings. The proposal in front of you is wholly within these parameters and is very consistent with the illustrative master plan that was submitted with the outline application. As you've heard, the current scheme will deliver 90 homes, 40% of which are affordable. That is 54 market homes, 36 affordable homes, in total 84 houses, 6 apartments. So this will make a significant contribution to Wiltshire's housing needs. Bewley are providing 3 times the amount of open space here as they're required to under the Section 106 agreement. That's 10,600 square metres and above the 3,140 that was in the 106. So that's, as we've heard, space that will serve the wider community and not just the new residents. As Andrew explained, Bewley and the team have worked proactively with the council and consultees and the parish council since we submitted this application in May of last year. We've listened to comments and made a series of amendments to the proposals. So to give a flavour of some of these changes, the attenuation pond has gone back to the southeast corner where it was in the outline layout. The housing south of the public right of way there has been removed. The back boxes have been added, for example, that in response to comments. On the pumping station, it is broadly in the same location as it was in the outline. I think actually it's even further from the edge than it was there. It's actually not, it's more than 5 metres from the boundary. I think it's about 15 metres. And it's set within landscaping, there's orchard planting around it. The pump itself is underground. It is a pumping station. It's not treatment, so that we wouldn't expect any odour there. And there is a condition on the acoustic performance and mitigation proposed there. And Wessex have confirmed they will adopt it as well. So Bewley have been keen to deliver high quality housing development here that does reflect the village character. Although the site isn't within a conservation area, there are a number of features that respond specifically and are bespoke to the house types here. For example, the use of reconstituted stone as a primary building material, the red and brown profile roof tiles. On the apartment block, it is 2.5 stories. The top story is within the roofscape, so it is fair to inaccurate to describe it as 2.5 story in height. Are we done? Yep.
Mr. Chairman, councillors, officers and members of the public. I'm speaking today on behalf of Holt Parish Council to urge you to reject this application. We have made detailed suggestions and objections, but remain deeply concerned by the cumulative harm caused by this unplanned, generic, low-quality scheme's failures. The committee report repeatedly states that individual concerns raised are not a reason for refusal of reserved matters. This is death by 1,000 cuts. Each failure may seem minor in isolation, but together they result in a substandard and harmful development that threatens Holt's character and quality of life. We know from an appeal decision in Malmesbury in 2023 that poorly designed schemes can and should be refused. I will discuss 4 of the concerns we raised, even though there are more. This scheme increases the frontage on Melksham Road from 8 to 15 houses, replacing a soft rural edge considered by the inspector at the outline appeal with a hard urban one, which is unacceptable in this rural setting. The proposed scheme prioritises large, expensive homes over smaller, accessible options for local families, contrary to Holt Neighbourhood Plan and the Housing Needs Assessment. This scheme is developer profit-led, not community-led. The original approval, considered in the appeal inspector's balance, promised a central village green. This plan removes the heart of the development, reducing the central green space to nothing much more than a grass verge and a tree. This has been done to accommodate more, larger, more profitable homes. Wiltshire Council has declared a climate emergency. The committee report acknowledges that the proposal does nothing more than meet the absolute minimum environmental standards. Gas boilers, lack of solar panels, and battery storage being built in the next 3 years. Is this right? We have made constructive, proportionate suggestions, mostly ignored by the developer. Wiltshire Council's own officers have also raised detailed concerns that are not summarised in the committee report, particularly urban design, landscaping, ecology and climate. Rejecting this scheme does not mean rejecting the development in Holt. It means demanding better. The MPPF is clear in confirming that design quality is fundamental to sustainable development. Good design creates better places in which to live and work and helps make development acceptable to communities. Also, planning decisions should ensure that developments will function well and add to the overall quality of the area, not just for the short term, but over the lifetime of the development. Wiltshire Council's housing shortfall does not justify rushing through unplanned substandard development. Developers must not be allowed to exploit the situation to push through second-rate schemes that fail on design, sustainability and community integration. In dismissing the Malmesbury appeals, the inspector stated that the disadvantages of the proposal would last 100 years or more and significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits assessed against the MPPF as a whole. Please reject this application. Demand better. Holt deserves a development that enhances, not harms, its character and community. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Siddall. Sorry, I think I pressed the wrong button there. That then takes us back to the case officer, who will try to reply to the points raised in the open forum, particularly the outstanding objections. Over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, let me just get to the beginning of those objections. 1 second. So in terms of the pumping station, the Public Protection Officer, that was discussed, and as was pointing out, it is a pumping station, not a treatment plant. Odours were not expected from there. So I haven't got a recommendation to add a condition there from an officer's point of view. Taking the appeal case, I have no details of that appeal case to present to you today. That would be considered in its context and on its own merits. We have discussed and appraised this application based on Holt and the scheme that's presented with the benefit of the various consultee responses. In terms of not going far enough, we have got some very, very significant changes to the scheme to get them to the standard that is required and representative of the overall outline permission. In terms of the frontage, for example, where it states 8 dwellings increased to 15, the actual blocks of those dwellings have not been significantly increased. It's not a case of 15 additional properties, 15 properties, because the blocks shown in the outline scheme. In any event, we are considering it very much on its merits, and the indicative scheme was not a condition for us to consider. Just going through the central green space, the criticism that the landscape officer made there was that he has subsequently reviewed further iterations of the scheme and has not objected to the final scheme, as acknowledged the changes that have been made, and the same with the urban design officer. Although they initially objected, the report sets out the comments that were the last comments to be received, which were of no objection. So in terms of the assessment, that has been critical in the judgment. I would not agree that the flats are 3-storey. There are 3 floors, but the exterior of the building, I believe, is accurately represented as 2.5. The reconstituted stone is buff and it's the predominant material locally. Let's get into the final consult. Could you clarify if there's something I haven't covered, please?
You kind of dealt with the question of poor design, but it was suggested that this was out of keeping with the village of Holt and would change the character of the village of Holt. Could you deal with that point, please?
I think it would be fair to say that any development of 90 dwellings on the edge of a village is going to have some impact on the character of the edge of that village. We have sought as far as possible to ensure that the character of the buildings within the development, the layout of the development, the landscape buffers, particularly to the south of the site and the east of the site, where the site borders the open landscape, have significant landscape buffers. We're satisfied, and again reiterating the comments of the urban design officer, that their objections have been adequately resolved. It would be very difficult to sustain an objection where our own urban design officer has commented positively on the final iteration.
The height, is that typical in the village of Holt, or is that much higher than other buildings in Holt?
Of the flats?
Yes.
Well, the flats, Holt's got a changing character as you go through it. And at this end of the village, the character of development is predominantly much more modern than at the western end of the village, where the existing village green is. The flats are, to me, quite comparable with some of the larger dwellings that surround the Ham Green. They're not typical of the dwellings that are immediately adjacent, but I think everyone would agree that copying the dwellings that are immediately adjacent wouldn't necessarily be the most appropriate response for the village.
On the sewerage, did I understand you to say that this is not a sewage treatment plant, it's simply pumping sewage down into a mains system?
That's correct, Chair. It's needed with the change in land levels, obviously, to connect to a main system if that is higher than the pipework from the existing dwellings. The only way that that's going to defy gravity is by pumping it. There is no sewage treatment plant, so there's no treatment of sewage at that location.
So if there were to be smells, it would be through pipes breaking that could be mended quite quickly, is that right?
Yes, the discussions that I had would indicate that operating efficiently and under the guidance of the Water Board, who would be responsible, there should be no odour impacts unless there was a breakdown in the system, as you say, which would be rectified by Wessex Water.
I've got Councillor Andrew Davis wanting to come in with a question. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chairman. We all appreciate we're not revisiting the development on this site, but I was surprised to hear from the officer that the indicative plan that was presented to the inspector when the appeal for this application, outline application, was improved, was not in any way conditioned to be the plan that could go forward. Now, just taking this one step further, obviously the decision we make today, should it be to grant approval, refusal, would possibly go to appeal before another inspector. But would that I'll ask the officer if I may, because this is by way of a question, would, if it was to go back to, if we were to refuse this today and it would go back to appeal, would the indicative plan be part of, you say you can't use the original indicative plan, but would the indicative plan that was submitted on the application for approval be relevant to this application? Because what I'm hearing from two sides is considerable changes from what was expected by the appeal and by the objectors, and also what what they were thinking the inspector was thinking. So the indicative plan that was presented by the inspector when this was approved, that won't be relevant to this application if this was to go to appeal, if we were minded to refuse today.
Case officer, Julie Mitchell.
Thank you. Well, it wasn't conditioned. There were all of the plans within the outline were contained within a design and access statement, and they were all kind of parameter plans, indicative plans, and clearly had a bearing on the appeal inspector's determination of what could be in their decision to allow the appeal and conclude that the landscape harm could be satisfactorily mitigated. It wouldn't be, if it was heard at appeal, a refusal against the development. The refusal would need to consider, does the reserve matters scheme that is before the inspector achieve a satisfactory landscape and design setting for the village or not?
Councillor Davis. Councillor Bill Parks.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We've heard some concerns about this pumping station, and the officer has answered about the smell. I'm reassured to see that if this committee were minded to approve and go with officer's recommendation, there is a condition about noise, so that's reassuring from my point of view. But I just would like to ask, I see that the climate officer has suggested no objections subject to conditions. And I wondered what those conditions were, please.
All of the conditions recommended by the climate officer have been transferred into the recommendation. I'm just turning to the conditions now.
Tell the numbers to Councillor Parks, please.
It's condition 10.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Sorry. There's also condition 5 requires prior to development above slab level a final sustainable energy strategy explaining the low carbon approach of the scheme taken in the technical detail design stages, including details of energy efficiency, low carbon technologies and integrated renewable energy generation shall be submitted and approved in writing by the local planning authority, and that's in line with the relevant building regulations. So it is in there as a prior, not necessarily pre-commencement, but prior to development above ground level.
Yeah, thank you. That answers my question.
Yeah, so just to clarify, it's 5, 6, 7 and 10 are all conditions.
Okay, that's helpful. So I think that takes us into the debate on this item, and I'm going to go to Councillor Trevor Carbin, who is the local member to start us off and perhaps to move a motion?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And again, thanks to the officer for the presentation today and for all the work that's been done over quite a long period, hasn't it? It's been a long process, dragging it through these 4 phases of consultation and gradually attempting improvements to the extent that officers are seeing it as coming just over the line in time. I mentioned the planning history earlier. Just going back to that for a moment, there's an omission, which is the previous application back in 2015 when an outline application was refused under delegated powers. And I noticed in that application that the applicants, which was Gladman at the time, were told not to appeal, and if they did appeal, Wiltshire Council would have them for costs. They actually did appeal, but then they withdrew it, and Wiltshire Council did get some costs off of them, because at that time, 10 years ago, this was seen as such an outrageous site that you could do that sort of thing. Obviously, since then, things have changed. The boot's firmly on the other foot these days, and we're now in the situation of the 5-year land supply, which was why this was granted at appeal. But I think one point about that is that we're going to get a lot of these sorts of applications, which are going to go through an outline on sites which would normally be seen as not sustainable or not appropriate because of our 5-year land supply situation. And I think it's quite important that when we do come to the reserve matters, that we're very careful to make sure that if we're losing the battle on quantity, we're not going to lose the battle on quality as well. And at least with the situation we're in now, where we have no chance whatsoever of getting anywhere near our 5-year land supply for the foreseeable future, we're down to 2, directly as a result of the government doubling the required figures, of course. But there's no possibility of ever, a year ago we were having these debates about whether this site should be in or whether that one should be included or whether this was deliverable or whether that wasn't. And we were tottering around that 5-year point. Sometimes we were below it, sometimes we were above it. Now with the change of circumstances, we're going to stay below it forever, I guess, or at least until something changes dramatically. So because of that, there's no point in worrying too much about the land supply situation, because it's what it is. We've lost it. But as I say, Chairman, there's a lot we can do. And again, we might see this as a precedent for lots of other applications which are going to come forward to make sure that we don't lose the battle on quality. And again, just by way of introduction, I'll go through a few more points in a moment, but the figure of 100 years seems to be bandied about. The appeal inspectors keep quoting that these things are going to be there for 100 years. I think they should be there much longer than that. Really, a well-built house should last more than 1 century. We should be talking about 2 or 3 of them, centuries that is. So that's a lot of people living in these developments, in and around these developments, a lot of lives, a lot of health and well-being issues for people who are going to be there. And that's why I think it is important that we get it right at this stage. And if that means delaying things for a few weeks to get it right, then it's well worth doing. And it's not going to cause any problems whatsoever in terms of the 5-year land supply and so on. Thinking about the things that have been mentioned and covered in the open forum and so on. I just need to mention, again, something which hasn't been mentioned yet is the fact that there's an outline application on the field to the north of this site, the other side of the Melksham Road from Redcliffe Homes. And obviously, because it's a totally different application, we're not talking about it. But there is this impact, the way the two come together. And if it was one application from one developer, we'd expect a master plan saying how they're going to deal with the fact there's a road going through the site and so on. But because it isn't, we get this dichotomy whereby we've got 2 planning officers, 2 highways officers, and it's quite frustrating that we're not able to get any common approach to the way the road is being dealt with as it hits this part of the village. Again, not something we can really deal with at this committee, but it is something that I just thought I'd like to mention because it's something that might come up again in the future at some point. The pumping station, I'm not entirely convinced that we've got this covered. I might come back to that if necessary at some point. The fact, again, that by increasing size of properties without increasing number of properties, we've squeezed out things like that open space that was going to be in the middle of it. Again, it just depresses the scheme and just makes it more unattractive overall. And going back to what Councillor Davis was getting at, the outline, the inspector, I think, described the plan that he had in front of him at the time as indicative but informative. Now, we know that we see these plans at outline stage, they're always indicative, and we know that it's not going to be exactly the way it actually gets built in the end. But it is supposed to be informative, and it is supposed to give a rough idea of what's going to be happening. And again, it's a pity we can't go back to the inspector and say, well, okay, you had that informative plan at outline, what do you think of this one? How far can you drift away from an informative plan before it becomes not the plan which was accorded at outline stage? Perhaps if this go to appeal, we'll find out. And again, the point we've had about the Melksham Road frontage, it's very uncertain, very different from what was presented at the outline plan. And we kind of ended up with a compromise. Frontage like that, you can do two things with it. You can either fence or hedge it off so that you hardly see the houses behind it, or you can have it open and you have an open frontage like you get in lots of places. We seem to have ended up with some kind of vague compromise between the two, which is quite messy and unattractive as a gateway to the village. You'll have seen, I hope, from the Parish Council that the character statement which was sent around to you earlier, and so even if you don't know the village, you'll have had a good idea of the kind of architecture and so on which the Parish Council is looking for on a site like this. There's a lot. The word minimum is used quite a lot in the report, so they've just done enough and no more. So there we are, just creeping over the line. There was one phrase, let's see if I can find it in a minute, which I particularly liked. Oh yeah, here we are. So we're on page 66. It says, the sustainability credentials of the scheme do not exceed the minimum expectations. I mean, that's a splendid phrase where you've got to read it 2 or 3 times just to get the full impact of it. Sustainability credentials do not exceed the minimum expectations. I think if somebody tells you you're not exceeding their minimum expectations, you're probably about to be sacked or divorced maybe. But it just sums up the whole thing, doesn't it? Here we are, we're just doing enough. And I think as far as the village hall is concerned, it's not enough, Chairman. It's not a good enough application. And I think what people want here, I mean, everyone's prepared to be flexible. You know you're not going to get exactly what you want with a scheme like this. You know the developers, nothing wrong with developers wanting to make a profit. That's how things work. But this has gone too far. It's gone beyond that stage of flexibility and compromise to something which is basically ugly. And as I say, it would be great to have something which the village can be proud of. And Holt has a good track record on that. If you know the village, you'll know the tannery development, which is something I think people are reasonably proud of. The Star Ground development, which is something they're very proud of in the village. And what we're looking for really is something similar with this one. So I think I've covered most of the points I wanted to, Chairman. What I will do
Forgive me interrupting you, Councillor Carbon. Could I just ask the case officer that expression about the credentials of the scheme do not exceed the minimum expectations? Do they in fact meet the minimum expectations?
I think almost certainly we would have had an objection from our climate officer if they didn't. So my conclusion to that is yes, they meet the minimum.
Let's go back to, sorry about that, Councillor Carbon.
That's all right, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I just thought I'd check that out.
It's a kind of rating of 0, is it? It's not a negative rating, it's not a positive rating, it's a 0 rating.
Could I just jump in on that though? It's the energy and sustainability requirements are generally governed by building regulations, and building regulations 2025 have recently increased in comparison to what they were before. So actually, even though they're considered to be the minimum requirements, they're actually pretty good. They're a government standard and based in statutory legislation under the building regulations. So when you say they meet the the minimum requirements. Those minimum requirements are still government standard, so it's not zero.
Right, so I'll just conclude then by making a proposal, Chair, and I'll move refusal. The reason being that the proposal does not achieve high-quality design and placemaking and fails to meet the objectives of CP 57 of the Wiltshire Core Strategy, the NPPF Section 12, the Wiltshire Design Guide and the Holt Neighbourhood Plan.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Do you have any better information about this Malmesbury decision, which I think also referred to CP 57? Can you tell us how parallel this situation is to that one, if at all?
Well, basically what it is, I've got it here, I can give it to anybody who wants to have a look at it. So
Maybe if you could read out any bit that you think is relevant.
I'll let you have it in a moment. Yeah, basically the appeal was by Bloor Homes for a site. It was a double appeal for 2 sites adjacent, I believe. But the gist of it was that the inspector or the Northern Area Planning Committee refused on the grounds of bad design. I did have their reason for refusal somewhere, but it's obviously not in the appeal decision. The appeal inspector then backed that up and dismissed the appeal. I'll just read the conclusion, perhaps, on that one. He says the delivery within a short timescale of a significant number of homes attracts substantial weight, as does the proposed contribution to affordable housing and benefits associated with employment and other considerations. However, it is unclear that similar benefits cannot be brought forward with a scheme that is better planned. I would echo that for this application, Chairman. The sequence of approvals to the original planning applications and the way have come forward, it talks about 2 parcels, which is obviously not relevant to what we're here. And then it goes on to the points about the MPPF, etc. And he's another one who uses 100-year. It must be something that planning inspectors like to use. But the disadvantage of the proposal would last 100 years or more and significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits assessed against the NPPF as a whole. For these reasons, the appeals should be dismissed. Right.
Thank you, Councillor Carbon.
Could I just make a point very quickly?
Yes, I'm happy to bring you in, Councillor. Miss Colleen.
Honorary Councillor. Sorry, Chair. Thank you. Just to say that obviously as other appeal decisions are material considerations, but they are also assessed at the time on their own merit and the particular circumstances of the case. And I think it would be straying into inappropriate territory to be making a decision based on this application and its merits based entirely on an appeal decision in Malmesbury, which is, clearly in a different location with different merits. So I would urge the members to put less weight on that and actually look at the scheme that's in front of them, and bearing in mind that this has been subject to 4 rounds of revisions. It has no outstanding technical objections. The objections have been noted, if there are any, in the officer's report, and a lot of work has gone into this to deliver a high-quality scheme, and a large majority of the objections have all been addressed. So I think that's what needs to be the
What I was
focus.
going to do, I think you're making some fair points there. What I was going to do, before I seek a seconder for Councillor Carbin's motion for refusal, I was going to give officers a chance to tell us that they heard his reasons for refusal. The question the committee will be asking itself is, do we stand a chance of defending this on appeal? And if we don't defend it, are we going to have a cost problem or not? So I think that the question to officers is, how do they see the chances of defending the reason for refusal as put forward by Councillor Carbin? And secondly, are they so hopeless? Are they so unarguable? Are they so unreasonable that we would be paying the costs of the developer of the appeal?
Well, it is. I note that the councillors, Councillor Carbin did draw your attention to the outline appeal inspector's report, where he said that the illustrative master plan should be informative. He also states at paragraph 72 that the plans showing the approved details should be confirmed for the avoidance of doubt, which they were in part of the outline. But he goes on to state that, however, requiring the development to be in accordance with the illustrative details is not only unenforceable but also unnecessary. These are reserve matters that will be considered at a subsequent stage. So he clearly, he had it in his gift at the time to condition the principles, and he chose not to because he thought it was unnecessary. So in that respect, this development and this scheme does not have to mimic entirely, and they very rarely do. Reserve matters very rarely mimic the illustrative master plan in specific details exactly. However, it is within the gift of the committee to make their own minds up. That is the point of the committee, and it is for members who are well experienced in developments and have done a lot of planning training. They can make their own minds up as to the design benefits and can seek to refuse it on the grounds put forward by Councillor Carbin. I would, however, urge that for detailed consideration on that, because it is a question of balance, and we are in the situation where we do need to deliver housing. We're not in a totally hopeless position where the land supply doesn't matter anymore. There will be some housing delivered on this site because obviously it's already received outline, but there is only so much that can be asked of a developer. Because, as you say, they are a developer and that's part of the business. So it's about finding the balance where there is a compromise between everybody's interests. And this has been worked on very hard. Like I said, 4 rounds of revised plans and consultations have gone out. So it's not a knee-jerk reaction. But, you know, it is at the gift of the members to decide in their own view what they think in terms of design.
Okay, in that case, is there a seconder for the motion for refusal? Is that you seconding it, Councillor Carbin? Right, well, it's Councillor Clark, I should say. Who would like to speak next in the debate? Councillor Clark?
Oh, okay, Jim, I was going to wait for some other people to speak. We're told about the sort of state of the housing market and everything else, and not wishing to sort of pour scorn on whoever this developer is, but we were told about the character of Holt. Well, I represented Holt for a year on Wiltshire County Council and previously on West Wilts District Council, and what we seem to see in front of us is absolutely nothing like this part of Holt at all. It's got no similarity in character to the Great Parks and Little Parks end. We're just cramming stuff in. What was a village green in the middle now seems to be well, it's a crossroads basically, isn't it, for development? And I understand there may have been 4 reconsultations on this, but I think it needs a 5th. Because this, I'm sorry, Chairman, I'm all for housing, appropriate housing in appropriate places. We've got to accept this as an appropriate place because it's got outline permission. But what we've got in front of us is, to my thinking, rubbish. Obviously, the developer doesn't think that, and all fair play to him for that. But I can't possibly support what we've got in front of us, hence my seconding Councillor Carbin.
I'm looking for Councillor Viger is the next speaker then.
Yeah, I have a lot of sympathy for Councillor Carbin, Councillor Clark, and for the residents who've spoken. I've a huge amount of sympathy for them. But officers will correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that designs that are put forward as illustrative designs at an outline stage are completely irrelevant. That what matters is what's put forward at reserve matters, and you can't be held to anything that you've put together at outline stage. I don't see any disagreement.
Can we hear from Jen Collins?
Yes, I mean, everything that's agreed at outline is the only thing that's agreed at outline is the principle and the access in this particular case. The other matters are reserved, and as was quite clearly set out in that inspector's outline appeal decision at paragraph 72, that to try and condition any broad compliance for this scheme with the illustrative outline would be unenforceable and unnecessary because the details should be discussed here. So in my view, Councillor Viger is correct.
So
I don't think, forgive me, Councillor
wouldn't
Viger,
say
I
it's
don't
totally
think
irrelevant,
Councillor
though.
Carbon, I don't think Councillor Carbon's motion refers to anything being different from the illustrative, does it? Or does it, Councillor Carbon? It doesn't.
I'm coming to that.
So I think the point, Councillor Viger, is that whether the design is good, and could you
So-
concentrate on whether the design is
Sure, it's just
good
that-
enough or
I
bad
was just
enough and
addressing that-
contrary to core policy 57?
I was addressing that point as it had been raised by Councillor Davis and by the residents, just simply to say that regrettably, I don't believe that anybody can be held to the illustrative drawings they put forward at the outline stage. All they had permission for before today, essentially, was a junction and 90 houses to be put on that field. So I don't see any material breach of any policy. The affordable home ratio is the minimum. The density is the maximum. The biodiversity is the minimum. The environmental standards are the minimum. Everything is the minimum, and you wish it wasn't. You wish it was better than that. But I don't see anything that will stand up an appeal, frankly. The pumping station, I think, is a real concern. Obviously, to people, they believe whatever's said that there may be some odour. So I would suggest that there should be a condition whereby the developer produces a report and a statement on the nature of the pumping station that particularly addresses the issue of odour, and that report should be signed off by Wessex Water, with Wessex Water as the operator of the pumping station, giving their own assurance that there will be no odour from it. And if that requires relocation or something, then, but I wouldn't have thought you could do much to relocate that. It's either going to smell or it's not. So, yeah, that's what I would suggest by way of a condition. But, very sadly, I can't see a reason for refusing this that was standard. The only reason would be core policy 57. It would be our judgment on it. And looking at the Malmesbury case as I am now, there the inspector was pointing out, for example, that 2 of the parcels of land had their designs done separately, and that he was mentioning the conflict with the MPPF on a clear design vision. And I don't think we've had a strong argument of conflict with the MPPF design principles here. So I'm very sorry, but I can't support it.
Okay, well, at the moment, we're debating the motion for refusal. Clearly, the question of conditions will only come up if we get to, if we don't vote for this and we get to a motion for permission, which you may wish to move shortly, I don't know. But at the moment, we're discussing Councillor Carbon's motion for refusal, and I'm looking to see if anyone else would like to speak, and I see Councillor Andrew Davis next.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm in a bit of a rock and a hard place on this one because I fully take on board what the officer is saying, and I did take on board the steer that she was saying in relation to you've done the training and you should know how we should go as a planning committee because you've done the training, and I take on board the steer you're doing, but I just, from hearing what the objectors are saying in relation to the whole, and taking on board what the local member is saying, I find this, I just don't like it. I think there's merit in what Councillor Carbon is saying, and Councillor Carbon has given I haven't got them written down, but he's given the where he thinks it might be, be able to be that would stand a refusal, and so I'm. If I didn't refuse it, I would abstain because I couldn't support this, even though I have done the training and I have taken on board the steer. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaz. I don't think Jane Collins said you can't oppose this. I think what she said is that it would be hard to win an appeal, but she didn't say that this was such an unreasonable motion for refusal that we would go down on costs. So I think the committee has the option, if it wishes, to try to refuse this, but it may or may not wish to do that. We'll see when we come to the vote. Does anyone else wish to speak on the motion for refusal? Because if not, I'll go back to Councillor Carbon to sum up on that, which is his right. I see no one indicating, so Councillor Carbon.
Yeah, again, just going back to, I'll just quote the inspector's words on the outline plan. He said it's indicative and informative. That's all we need to say about that, really. And I've just got the bit from the MPPF, which I think is relevant to this case. It says, the creation of high quality, beautiful and sustainable buildings and places is fundamental to what the planning and development process should achieve. Good design is a key aspect of sustainable development, creates better places in which to live and work, and helps make development acceptable to communities, and so on. And then there's several more paragraphs in a similar vein. That would be the basis of our case at the appeal, Chairman, and myself and the Parish Council will willingly fight that on behalf of the committee, and I think we would make a very good case for improving the application. Of course, if the developer were to come back with an improved version in the meantime, that wouldn't be necessary. So don't be afraid of that. We'll sort out the appeal for you. We'll put up a good fight at that level. So I'll just leave it at that, Chair, and reiterate the reasons I had previously.
Thank you, Councillor Carwin. Okay, well, I'm going to go to the vote on the motion for refusal. Would all in favour of refusing this for the reasons? I tell you what, shall we have that read out? Have you got Councillor Carbon's motion for refusal, Ellen?
No, would you be able to get it?
Have you got it in writing,
57?
Trevor? If you could send it across to Ellen, I'll get her to read it out, or just so that people are absolutely clear what they're voting on. ELLEN.GHEY. I see something has come in. Would you like to read that out then, Ellen?
Of course I can. So Councillor Carbon has moved for refusal because the proposal does not achieve high quality design and placemaking and fails to meet the objectives of Core Policy 57 of the Wiltshire Core Strategy, MPPF Section 12, Wiltshire Design Guide and the Holt Neighbourhood Plan.
I'm going to go to the vote on that now. Would all in favour of refusing this for those reasons please show? 5 votes for. All against, please show. 1, 2, 3. That is refused. So we'll have an interesting appeal. I'm sure it will go to appeal, Councillor Carbon. There's no way this is not going to go to appeal.
Yes.
Recording your vote, Councillor Clark, in favour of the refusal. And
You didn't ask for abstentions.
oh, I beg your pardon. Are there any abstentions? 1 abstention. So we had 5 votes for refusal, 3 against and 1 abstention. And Councillor Ridout did not vote because she's not in the room. Okay, well, there we are. I'm sure this will go to appeal. We look forward to seeing the outcome of it. And there is just a quick discussion to be had about who will represent the council. We wouldn't normally expect the case officer to argue in favour of the refusal. Jen, are we happy for Councillor Carbon to represent us, or would we employ a consultant to support him?
It would be the case officer who would run the appeal on behalf of the council.
Seems a
as
bit
the case
unfair
officer.
to expect the case officer.
That's
to
our job. We
argue
represent
against.
the council. We're your officers. You know, we're only here with our recommendation. You don't have to agree with us. And if you disagree with our recommendation, then the council's view is that of the committees, which is to refuse. So we write our appeal on that basis as the case officer representing the council. That's our job.
Okay, well, there we are.
Can I just say, though, having said that, it would be, you know, obviously we're more than happy to discuss with Councillor Carbon and take on board their views, and also the parish council and Councillor Carbon will be able to make their own independent representations to any appeal. And obviously Julie will probably be the case officer leading on that. So I don't know if she's got anything to say in that regard.
I think we'll let that sort itself out in due course, but clearly Councillor Carbon will want to be involved and the parish council. So we will wait to hear in due course the outcome of what undoubtedly will be an interesting appeal. Thank you very much to all of the objectors and supporters for coming along and giving us the extra information that we were looking for. And that takes us on to the next item on the agenda, which is the application at Farley Avenue, Trowbridge. And as I said before, we welcome Councillor Joe Trigg, who is a local member, and the case officer for this is Angela Ellis. Welcome, Angela Ellis, and we look forward to hearing from you on your report and your recommendation.
Thank you, Chair. Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me? We're here for a two-storey side extension at 14 Farley Avenue. The subject property is a modern linked attached dwelling attached by intervening single-storey garages of the host property and number 16 to the east. The site is at the southern extreme of the Broadmead estate, backing onto Wingfield Road and its southwest approach into Trowbridge. It was part of the first development in the area, which was then developed over various late 20th century phases to the estate today. Okay. The area is modern in character, with shared design and materiality along the modern road layout. Whilst the northern side of Farley Avenue is quite uniform in form, with a rigid front building line, the south side in question has greater spatial gaps by larger plots, differing front building lines, a variety of porches and greater landscaping, creating more secluded plots. The design alters again further along Farley Avenue. The area has undergone various developments since inception, when the design was first stated to be commended. Despite the many early changes to the avenue, however, there has been limited change in the recent past. However, there is precedent first-storey development over a garage in the area, including the 2003 development at number 18, which is 2 doors away and of a greater first-floor footprint. There have also been variations to off-street parking, various front porches, and varying the front building line further. The proposal is for a 2-storey side extension on the site of the existing single-storey garage. Effectively a first-storey extension, but step back into the site from the neighbouring garage by a 0.4 metre gap. On the ground floor, with internal reconfiguration, this would enable the creation of a new kitchen dining space and a front access store. The ground floor plan would enable a continuous front building line with increased rear projection of 3.1 metres at ground floor level only. On the first floor, the proposals would create an extended bedroom and additional bathroom. The extension would be in faced concrete block with interlocking concrete roof tiles, white UPVC windows, all to match the host dwelling. The design includes standard details for accessible first floor extension above an existing garage, namely reduced ridgeline, balance of fenestration, I've missed my point, adhering to the front building line and matching materials. There have been various revisions to off-street parking and access during the life cycle of the application, but there remain no technical concerns regarding highways and parking strategy. The only outstanding queries to the proposals raised by online objections are not planning related, but for building control and party wall agreements. As such, there remain no concerns regarding design or scale, no outstanding technical highways or parking issues. The proposal is for standard, modest development, making efficient use of space in line with other precedents in the area and in materials to integrate successfully. And as such, there is no justification for refusal, and officer recommendation is to approve with conditions. I do have to apologise. It has been brought to my attention that in 2 places in my report, I refer to number 18 as the link attached property. So to clarify, number 14 is the subject property, number 16 is the link attached neighbour, number 18 is the next property, the last in the line of similar 9 properties that already has the 2-storey extension. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So the next thing is questions from members of the council, and I'm quite happy to bring in Councillor Joe Trigg to the case officer. Are there any questions? Looking around the room, I'm not seeing any hands. So that then takes us on to the open forum, and we have 4 speakers. We have three objectors, Mrs. Senior, Ms. Gaunt and Ms. Barrett. And then we have a supporter who is Ben Rule. So we take the objectors first. Mrs. Senior, are you there? Over to you, Sen.
My name is Catherine Senior. I live at number 16 Farley Avenue, and I share a drive and a linked garage with Mr. Rule. Mr. Rule intends to bring his extension 2 or 3 feet onto the drive. Why? He could easily put that on the back, and I would not object, but I do not think it is necessary to spoil the front of the garages where they are all flat, where nobody has ever done anything this before. And I know things come to pass not to stay, but I do not know why it is necessary to bring it forward. It also means that I'm going to have a gap, that we share a party wall with the garage, and there is going to be a gap between his garage and my garage. If he's bringing his house forward, then it means that the gap is going to be on my side. Not my property, on his property, but still on my side, which I think could leave me vulnerable to animals, anybody coming in. I do want to feel safe in my property. The avenue was built, nothing has been really explained to me at all about it. The avenue was built in 1964, comprising of 8 4-bedroomed houses, garage linked. It was put forward for an award for its style, its ambience, its architecture, and its aesthetic presentation. No one since then has wanted to build over the garage. Nobody has even attempted to build over the garage. Extensions have been at the back, which is fine as far as we are concerned. Everybody respected the architect's work. Number 18 is completely different. That's the other side of me. It is offset and it is not built, they have not built over the garage. It does not interfere with the aesthetic beauty of the whole avenue. The people living in Farley Avenue are good, law-abiding citizens. We have all, this may not be relevant, but we have all contributed to Trowbridge in the art, sport, education, and lots of other things. We are law-abiding, and the support from me has been incredible. We look after each other. Trowbridge could be restored to its former glory in the 50s and 60s, and everybody is trying to restore Trowbridge, as you know. The buildings in Trowbridge are superb. Farley Avenue is a lovely example of somebody taking time and the trouble to make it look aesthetic. It is something, so are we trying to preserve something special in a potentially lovely market town which Trowbridge used to be? We are certainly on Trowbridge's side. Once consideration and cooperation and compromise, and in this case, a bit of common sense is not used, goodwill goes out of the window. We have spent the last 5 years looking after a 91-year-old gentleman who lived in the house before Ben and Rebecca, and we all looked after him. Some people are annoyed and a bit upset. I have to say, living next door, I want a good relationship with the Rules, and I think they probably want a good relationship with me. The thought of having 2 delightful little boys living next door to me is lovely. I have spent all my working life in Trowbridge teaching, and I would prefer to live in harmony, and I wish the family to be as happy in Trowbridge and in Farley Avenue as I have been since 1976. Thank you for listening to my thoughts.
Thank you, Mrs. Senior. I let you run over a bit there, but what I'll do is I'll add a little extra time to Mr. Rule's slot when we come to him. Ms. Gaunt is the next speaker.
Good afternoon. I'm here representing
myself, obviously, and my two sisters, who co-own 16 Farley Avenue with my mother, which is link attached to 14 Farley Avenue in Trowbridge by the garage, and my mother resides at the property. So our objections to the planning application are as follows. The proposed extension will separate the existing joined garages and will require structural changes to the garage arrangements. Our garages are currently joined together by what appears to be an internal single skin brick partition wall showing a flat roof structure. Structural changes to our roof and the drainage of it will be necessary, but at no time have we been consulted about this or any proposals to make the necessary structural changes to our garage wall and roof. We've not been advised how the applicant will ensure our garage remains watertight following changes to the currently joined flat roof and that our internal wall will become an existing one once their garage is removed. Furthermore, we've got concerns regarding the foundations of the new extension, which could affect the structural integrity of our garage due to the partition wall probably having limited foundations which could be compromised by the removal process. Point 2, which is linked to point 1, the applicant has recently told my mother that he has employed someone to reassure and explain things to her, and that she knows him because he goes to her church. This gentleman subsequently wrote to my mother asking to come round to the house and to see her, and the letter was addressed to Kath. This seems highly irregular, presumptive, and quite possibly manipulative of an 84-year-old woman. So far we have declined to accept this invitation. Point 3, the proposed demolition of the existing garage and the construction of the large extension will compromise the security of the property. This is due to the fact that the planning application shows a gap between the two buildings. This leaves our property significantly more vulnerable to intruders and crime, and I refer back to my earlier point regarding the gentleman from the church employed to reassure my mother. She's not engaged at this point due to the manner in which this was proposed to her. Point 4, during the construction phase, my mother will be unable to access her garage due to the demolition of the existing structure, and there will be obviously safety risks. Point 5, given the close proximity of the proposed extension to our property, at no time have we been approached for permission to erect any scaffolding or supports on our land, or to potentially block access to the existing garage at the property, which is in daily use. Point 6, access to the connecting drain is currently in our utility room. These drains are linked to 3 or 4 houses, and access to maintain these drains has been difficult in the past. Furthermore, as per the revised floor plans, we have concerns still about the corner of the extension in which a load-bearing wall will be placed over the existing drainage system, which could collapse. There are restricted covenants and easements shown on both of our deeds and those of 14 Farley Avenue. At this stage, we're unable to establish what they are. However, at no time has this been acknowledged within the planning application. They may impact upon the ability to further develop the site. The planning, Farley...
I think you are almost a minute over. I think I'd better stop you there, but thank you very much. And then we've got Elizabeth Barrett, who is the third objector. And don't worry, Mr. Rule, I'm going to give you at least a minute and a quarter on top of your time. Elizabeth Barrett is the next speaker.
My name is Elizabeth Barrett, and my husband and I own number 1 Berkeley Road, a house situated on the corner of Berkeley Road, Farley Avenue, directly opposite 14 Farley Avenue. We purchased our property from the builders Smith and Lacey of Corsham and moved in 1967. Today, I am speaking for both of us and on behalf of most of the residents of Farley Avenue up to house number 18, which was the original cul-de-sac end of the avenue, who, because of their work and school and pickup commitments, cannot attend the meeting in person. Since the completion of the estate, some families have moved on and new ones have arrived. But as a community, we have all integrated amicably. Some alterations to properties have taken place, including our own, but we live in a different style of house to the Farley Avenue ones. But nothing on the scale of the proportion, the scale of the alterations proposed at number 14. We are concerned that this two-storey extension will set a precedent for the future to turn four-bedroom family homes into two semi-detached houses, thus creating a terrace effect. We think we think that a two-storey extension is completely out of character with the other properties in Farley Avenue and is contrary to various clauses of Core Policy 57. A previous planning application on another property was refused by the Planning Inspectorate, with the main issue being, 1, the effect of the proposed development on the character and appearance of the surrounding area, 2, the preservation of so much of the original character of an estate of this period is unusual. We are further concerned that the severance of the joined garages with a single block party wall will create difficulties changing house deeds and re-registering them at the land registry, as well as costs incurred. Do the council have the legal right to force this garage separation onto a neighbour who doesn't want it, never mind the moral implications? Lastly, I would like to draw your attention to page 80 of today's agenda, point 9, clause 2.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. I'm sorry, I hadn't realised. Well, you were exactly on the time. Brilliant. So we've now got, I'm just turning to 9.2 on page 80, and I will quickly read through that. The last speaker then is Mr. Rule, and as the objectors overran, Mr. Rule, I'm going to give you 4.5 minutes if you need it.
Thank you very much. So, firstly, I am a upstanding, law-abiding member of the community. I contribute to Trowbridge Rugby Club humongously, as sponsorship, various football clubs humongously through sponsorship, so as defamation of character, I'm an upstanding member of the community. First point, all we want to do is make a decent-sized space for myself and my family to live in, without being saddled with huge mortgages for decades to come. We've taken time to choose our builders carefully. We've chosen a more sort of mature, an elder generation of team, so they're not playing loud music, they're not bantering the way you might often find on building sites. I know about these things, I visit sites myself often. The driveway, which was a concern, we've already commenced works on the driveway, and I don't think that's a problem at all. We've sought a surveyor, which you mentioned earlier on, and the surveyor we asked him to act for us because he had a relationship with you already. Talking of relationships, I don't know if the committee knows, but Councillor Joe Triggs got a relationship with our friends over here. They went to school together. If the application is successful, I want to add, we want to start the building work within a month, and we want it to be quick, safe, and we've got absolutely no implication of making sure that you can't use your garage for any period of time at all. The roofs in the two garages are linked through beams, and there's a separation of the beams. You talked about your garage, your garden being vulnerable, which I thought we crossed this bridge when we had a meeting in your lounge when we revised our plans for the third time, and we proposed that we put a gated system on the front, and the boundaries on our is on our side of the boundary as well. So, we're not here to fall out with anybody. We're here to make a family home for years to come. My children go to school in a local school, and we're not here for an argument. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Rule. I'm going to go back to the case officer to deal with, there were quite a large number of detailed points came up in the open forum. I hope you've got some notes and you can try to deal with them all.
Thank you, Chair. I did make some notes. If I miss anything, please do shout at me. Mrs. Senior, your first note was why to bring the extension forward. Obviously, it's maximising space, it's efficient use of the plot, it's a standard design detail to use that existing front building line. So it's a standard approach to this very standard form of development. The 40 centimetre gap, the application has had various revisions. I believe they were in response to meetings with the neighbours, and there were concerns about maintaining that original boundary building line. There are no concerns with that 40 centimetres gap. Again, it's a different way of doing the same development, and there are no design problems with that. It manages to keep the same proportions, the same style of windows, the same materials, so it's respecting that, that aesthetic. I do appreciate that it's very much a, as you say, 1964 design. There have been changes on the street. There have been various porches that have pushed that building line forward. There are slight differences, but as you say, that ambience is still there. And I do not believe, as I say, this very standard form of design would alter that very special character. We'll point out that they're not listed assets. There are no particular designations. There is no limit to this standard form of development. Miss Gaunt, your questions regarding the separate garages, issues with foundations, drainage. I cannot comment further because I'm not building regulations. That is part of the statutory building regulations processes. There are no concerns with any of those points from a planning perspective. Access during works, that was another point, and I think in my report do mention a development of this scale does not warrant a construction management plan, but that is something for the committee to decide. Not necessarily just for neighbour access, but I do believe there's a school further on the Wingfield Road, so that's for the committee to decide. And the idea of a precedent, there are an awful lot of precedents in the area, as you can see from this development here, the top two being for parking, but also this is Berkeley Road, as you say. Miss Berwick living on Berkeley Road, it's already extension above a garage there, as there is here, various others, and number 18 if you wish to include it. So again, it's standard form of development, and each case would be assessed on its own merits. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think that takes us then to the local member, and I'll go over to Councillor Joe Trigg, who is there in front of me.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just for transparency, I am going to just address the fact that, yes, I did go to school with one of Mrs. Senior's daughters, but I haven't seen that daughter in nearly 40 years since leaving, and we were in different years. So I appreciate we were at the school at the same time, but we weren't actually friends or classmates at that point. Anyway, so with regards to this, just a very brief statement. So thank you for your time today and the officer's time and subsequent report. I am aware that there have been some considerable concerns from local neighbours about this planning application, and a number of objections have been made, some of those you've heard today. I do want to recognise as well, though, as Mr. Rule has acknowledged, that the applicants have made some significant changes from their initial plans, reducing the size and bringing it in line with the front of the house. And I am conscious that both neighbours have tried to work together and talk to each other in this particular circumstance. So this is a neighbourhood in which many have lived for decades, raising families and making significant contributions to our community, as you've heard. And I appreciate that these emotional attachments are separate to the planning process, but I think it is important to recognise our residents and their concerns about their environment in which they live, and provide this platform for their voices to be heard. So I called this in based against core policy 57 and around design and general appearance. I think it is still important to note that Farley Avenue is the 1960s design and build with a very open and spacious feel that has been maintained in large part since initial construction. And that look and feel provides the unique character of the road in this locality. In relationship to adjoining properties, there are obviously issues to be dealt with elsewhere with regards to the party wall. Again, this is not part of this planning process, and the physical impact of that and how neighbours' concerns are allayed. But this extension and change will also inevitably alter how number 16 is presented in the street and the overall aesthetic appeal of that open character previously mentioned. Actually, as the planning officer has just said, should the committee be minded to pass this application, I would ask for a construction method statement or condition to be added concerning the timing of the movement of construction vehicles. The road is used extensively for drop-off and pick-up of children at the start and end of the school day for St John's Primary School, and these times should be avoided. Small children on scooters and builders' vans are not a good mix in that kind of particular area. So finally, I would move. Is it right for me to move at this point? Do I move at this point?
You're not a member of the committee today, so I think you would need to pencil something in for someone else to move if they're willing on your behalf.
So in which case then I'm going to ask whether any members of the committee would move to refuse this application based on the impact on the character of the street and affecting the adjoining properties.
Thank you very much. I think perhaps I should just get the officer to comment on how defensible that reason for refusal would be.
Obviously, I've assessed this application as being not contentious in any way. The standard form of development. It's a type of application that I see regularly. The design details are very much there with the ridge line, the fenestration, the materials. I would, yes, I would say it's not.
Okay, well, you disagree with it, but I don't think you're warning us of dire consequences.
Can I, sorry, jump in, Chair? I would say that
Jen Collins.
sorry, I would say, Angelique, if you could put the there we are. So Two Doors Down has had a similar extension, and also number 1 Berkeley Road, which is almost directly opposite the application site. That is a very similar development as well. I cannot see the a basis for refusal of this application. I don't think it would stand up appeal, but obviously it's within the committee's gift to test that. But in both Angela's view and my view, that in officers' views, it wouldn't stand up at appeal.
Let's then go into debate, and I'm trying to think. I see Councillor David Weiger is indicating. Would you like to?
Do we have questions first, Chair?
Yes, you can have a question. Of course you can, Councillor Weiger.
So just for the officers, so you're saying that there is a similar development 2 doors down. Which one of the photographs is the one that's 2 doors down? Okay, is that a similar mass to this one in terms of the size of the upper and lower rooms? Or is it smaller?
Much bigger, as you can see. So this is where there was an existing garage here, so it's being built above the garage, first story extension above, greater footprint to the rear. Sorry, I'm in the wrong place. This is where the garage was. Yeah. First story extension above, and there's also been an additional garage, so a much greater footprint.
But they must have had more room then, because this one is coming to a butt up against one of the speakers'
There
houses.
is, and I think as the neighbours have attested, this is the last in the line of 9 similar properties.
Right.
This one is not link attached, but it is still very much part of those 9 properties.
So one of the objections was, or one of the concerns was about this 40-centimetre sort of corridor that gets created. Mm-hmm. And I do get, can a human being get into a 40-centimetre corridor? You'd have to, no. You'd have to be very thin. So how does that get maintained, and how do you stop a build-up of I know that rats don't go to places, they go to food, right? So I don't buy entirely the sort of rat story, but if you've got a sort of very small corridor and you can't get into it, would you just talk through what the potential risks are, or talk through why that's okay?
Well, it's in terms of the maintenance, that would be, or if there were any issues arising where you needed to get down that side, that would be a matter for the applicant to discuss with the neighbours. And at that time, if they needed to access that side and the only way they could do it would be through the neighbouring property, that is a matter for them to discuss and get permission from the neighbouring property at that time. It's not, in my mind, or a reason to refuse this application. There's no amenity, that's not a material significant harm to the occupier's amenity.
Got Councillor Suzanne Wickham wanting to ask another question, but could I just, before we lose that, could I ask the 40 centimetre passageway or corridor or gap, that's about, sorry, for older people like me, that's about sort of 16 inches, is it? And who would own that? That would belong to the neighbour rather than the applicant, is it?
That's on the applicant's property.
On the applicant's property.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go to Councillor Suzanne Wickham, who has a question.
Yeah, thank you. I was just going to ask, do we have a visual of that? I know, so is this the path that would come from the front to the back between where the garage?
So can you see this one here? This is the existing block plan with the linked garages, and there's a 40 centimetre gap there. It wasn't on the original plans. It was very much led from neighbour discussions, I believe, to resolve issues with concerns of how that extension foundations would be built abutting that garage.
I suppose that could actually be slightly helpful if the neighbour needed to put a new roof on his or her garage. It would be easier with a gap than without, wouldn't it? Councillor Ernie Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Apologies to the objectors if they think I'm trivialising this. I'm not in any way. I noticed that the applicant is proposing to put, or presumably to replace the garage door onto the front of the extension, and that obviously would sort of continue to keep the street scene. Is there any condition required to make sure that at some other time he doesn't take it down and just put a sort of wooden door in there? Or would that be unreasonable? So I would have thought keeping that garage door there, at least it looks in keeping with the street.
There hasn't been any proposed condition to remove permitted development rights to convert that in the future. A window would face into the front garden. There would be no concerns with amenity. It is part of that built cluster, that structure. It wouldn't be a garage. It's small enough to be a store. And as you say, at the moment, retaining those doors is continuing that garage aesthetic.
So if we were to approve the recommendation, it would be permitted development for the applicant to take that away and put something different there, is that right? So that's something that the committee might want to consider when we come into debate, which we're about to go into, I think.
So to clarify then, if the committee were minded to approve this, we would need to remove permitted development rights to ensure that that garage door, in inverted commas.
I don't think that would be appropriate. The government guidance is that permitted development rights should only be removed in where they're robustly justified. Moreover, there is an argument to suggest that the changing of a door isn't actually even development, and therefore it's not necessarily within the Planning Act or within the powers to do that. It's only where it affects a material change of external appearance of the dwelling, and then it becomes development, and that's arguable. But to change a door may not be considered development. It's a moot point in planning.
Councillor Clark.
Sorry, John, I don't want to drag this out too long, with all respect to everybody, but how can you say that removing, say, a garage door, or what appears to be a garage door, and replacing it with a single-person glass-fronted door doesn't affect the appearance? It'd affect the whole street scene, surely.
I think we're at one of those bits in planning where it's sort of what is material, what is the definition of material, and I think that's bit too complicated, but suffice to say that there has to be a robust justification. The planning guidance is very clear that permitted development rights should only be removed in exceptional circumstances, and in officers' views, that that bar isn't met in these circumstances.
Thank you, Ms Collins. Well, it's
That is obviously only our opinion.
I think we're now going to go into debate. Did we answer your question, Councillor Wickham?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to go into debate now. I'm looking for a local member to move a motion. We've heard what Councillor Trigg has asked a local member to move. Councillor Stuart Balman.
Hello, I've spent the last 18 years living on Wingfield Road, just around the corner from here. Personally, I see this as a very standard extension, and I don't see a major reason to refuse it. So what I'd like to propose is we accept the officer's recommendation, but we put a condition in terms of the construction.
The construction management statement.
Yeah, so that we keep vehicles away from the popular school times.
And what about the permitted development rights?
No, I see no reason to take those away.
You leave those as they are. Okay, well, is there a
Put that on the
seconder
table.
for that motion? Councillor Trevor Carbin and Councillor Suzanne Wickham were both. You can minute either one you like, Ellen. So we've got a motion moved and seconded for the recommendation with a condition to require a construction management statement as suggested by Councillor Joe Trigg. Does anyone else wish to speak on that? For or against? If not, you probably don't need to sum up, Councillor Palmer. Let's go to the vote. All in favour, please show. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. That's unanimous because Councillor Horace Prickett had to leave us. He had another appointment, an important appointment at 5 o'clock, and so he's no longer here. No doubt you will minute his absence, Ellen. And there we are. We've permitted that, and thank you to everybody for coming along and giving us their helpful information. And the decision notices will probably be, on that one anyway, issued tomorrow, I guess. Thank you all.